So why am I doing this? I'm starting this podcast because we all have a story and finances play a part in our struggles and successes. If we can learn from the many mistakes many others have made, we can make sure that more of us are successful. Like the quote says, to increase the chances of success, we must increase our failure rate. To be honest, I failed a ton. I will bring people from all walks of life, but mostly service members. If you have a story you would like to share, do not hesitate to reach out. From the go, like and subscribe to this podcast so many others can benefit. Welcome to another episode of the Financial Enabler Podcast. Today we have Ben Hofstetter, author, former Army infantry captain, and a badass. I like starting off with the hoodies, right? So I'm wearing this hoodie from Bombs Away Brewing, best brewery in Albuquerque, probably the only true EOD bar. If you think you're an EOD bar, you're not that cool. There you go. Let's move on. Let's get to what matters. How you doing, Ben?
I'm great. How are you, man?
Nice.
Glad to be here.
I'm glad you're here. You know, we've talked a ton, and it's crazy how life has brought us together for what it seemed to be my project to now is like other projects, and it's like it just continues to expand. It's just been awesome. Obviously, I don't want to go too deep into like your military career, but give us who are you? Tell us about you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess if we're going to start in our connection right through the military community, I was a ROTC grad. I went to Gonzaga University. I graduated back in 2015 up in Washington. Commissioned as an infantry officer. Like you said, did my first 4 years down in Fort Stewart and 3ID. And then I branch transferred to Signal Corps. And then I went right back to a line battalion in the 82nd. And I was in 2501 Geronimo, 1st Brigade for about 3 years. And then just got out last year. So
nice.
Recently civilian.
Recently civilian, just in case somebody wanted to come here and be like, hey, why does that Army officer have a beard? I was like, he's not that cool, right?
Yeah.
No.
I was on the right post, wrong side of the fence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that all matters, right? Well, cool, man. That's awesome. And it's, I've never gone into too deep, but now you just said it. And I love, how interesting military pride is, right? And you're like, you say the long unit name and Geronimo, and like, we don't do anything like that in the Marine Corps. So it's very interesting to me and fun with that.
Well, I think you do, right? Because like I know a lot of Marines are like in 2-1. I think it's like the Beirut Battalion, right? And there's some other some of those battalions have names that are historical, and it's very similar, right? So we do historical, especially in the paratrooper world.
I guess you're right? And I'm just not used to it that much. But you're right. Like there's the infantry battalions have a slogan. I just not used to it hearing it put together. But I guess that makes perfect sense, and that says I'm wrong. Proves I'm wrong, which is still awesome. I didn't know you were in the Signal Corps.
Yeah. I branch transferred as part of my contract.
What does that mean as an officer? Were you a signals intelligence officer or a communications officer?
Communications. So I was a battalion S6 for Geronimo. So awesome. I had my team of, I think I had like 10 at maximum, like 5 at minimum over the couple of years, and we did some radios, we did some computers. I spent some time as kind of in the S3 realm as well, kind of a little bit of both worlds, just because I had that infantry background. So, and again, I was an infantry battalion, line S6. So it was an interesting mixture of the two, the two worlds.
Yeah. Did they ever tell you to go do like infantry stuff as a S6?
Yeah, so we did a lot actually, especially like as the S6, as a captain on the staff. And so a lot of times we do like our MDMP or like whatever like nerd captain staff things that we would do. And I would play the bad guy role, right? Because I could kind of like visualize and do like S2 is putting dudes on the board, and then I'm talking through, or I'm doing the AS3 is doing COA 1 and I'm working with the team to write COA 2. Like there was a lot of crossover that was really useful there. And then of course, as an S6, you have to kind of be able to understand who you're communicating with and why.
Yeah.
And it's been a year and a half, but now I'm reflecting back on things. But it's like, why would I make HF a primary? How do I know what company to put where? Or just, because I know their operators are better, or they have equipment that's down. Like all this stuff kind of factors in that you don't. Yeah. It's tough to think about when you're just one side or the other, right? So.
Right. That's awesome.
It was fun.
So that's really interesting. So now with you playing And I'm sure, regardless of the rank, the senior you get, you got to play good guy, bad guy. Has that helped you? And now this is a two-part question. Did that specifically help you when you transition? And second question, how has your time in the military helped you in the civilian world?
Yeah, so the answer to that is yes to both of those questions. Has it helped me, and has my time in the military helped me? I think the way it helped me the most, and I genuinely mean this, is that like at the captain level or the senior NCO level, like you're not in the trenches anymore at anything, right? So if I've referenced my signal time, I had dudes who were 25U as the Army, 25U or uniform, like works on radios, right? And there's like 25 Bravos work on computers or networking or whatever it was. I don't remember all the acronyms or the MOSs specifically anymore. But then as the 25 Alpha, right, or whatever my NCOIC was at the time, right, we're not individualized. We're not doing one thing or the other. So you have to be able to work that realm on the signal side, but then you have to be able to go communicate to an infantry battalion commander, or like at certain missions that we were doing, like we're in Afghanistan, it's like the brigade commander, right, and I'm talking to him on about why my radios or my whatever is doing this thing, or why my companies and platoons are doing whatever. And so you have to be able to thread that needle and walk kind of both worlds. And so that experience was extremely useful going into my current job, like my actual day-to-day W-2 job in the tech consulting world, tech project management world, because I talk to hardcore nerds, right? Like people who will like go and code the most insane like back-end app you've ever seen in your life. And I can convert what they're doing to business speak, right? To some sales manager who has absolutely no idea about any of it, right? Or some, revenue stream manager or whatever it is, right? And you have to be able to kind of speak nerd and not nerd and find that middle ground. And so I think I learned a lot of those skills in the military, actually quite a bit.
That's awesome. And it's I'm glad to see that, like, how much we could use. And I'm a big proponent of, like, it takes a lot of maturity to realize that so much that we do in the military is actually useful if we're able to distill it. But, like, if you don't, then you're just going to complain about your time in the infantry,
Yeah, I think for me, I was on camp like this was not useful to me up until I basically started getting out, and I started really like actually getting out, and I was doing all these like informational interviews, right? So if anyone's getting out, and you're trying to get into like corporate world or wherever, you got to go talk to as many people as you can and like learn as much as you can because you're coming from a different world. And then you have to figure out how to translate, like you said, your opportunities, what you did in the military into civilian speak. And as you're like in that translation process, you're learning like, oh, there was a lot more that I did that is relatable. And while I can't, for your instance, like, oh, I disarmed some IED on the side of, Route Green, right? That doesn't mean shit, but hey, that doesn't mean anything. But like what does mean something is like, hey, I was able to communicate effectively with different echelons. I could show up into some battle space that I didn't know anyone there. I could still communicate with everyone and get everyone on the same page, and then safely disarm and safely do my job. Right? Like that's a totally different conversation than like, oh yeah, dude, I went through a smaller bomb at a bigger bomb and made that bigger bomb go away. Right? I think that's a different conversation.
Yeah. The maturity of what we do is super important. And because you said you went to Gonzaga, what did you study in there? Or did you study anything that you're using now?
Yeah, a little bit. So I had a business degree, and so the way different colleges or universities do different things, right? So we just had the business administration degree, and then we did concentrations or focuses or whatever you want to call it, right? And so I ended up with two. I did a supply chain management focus, which I don't really use that much right now, but then I did a management of information systems, which is basically what I do now, right? It's kind of that middle ground between the computer programmer and business analyst. And so, I did basic, like build a website, build a database, whatever it is, right? It's just, you're just kind of scratching the surface of technology, really IT, that lets you kind of reach into that world later on in life.
Cool.
Branch into that world in later life.
That's interesting because I did an MIS in my MBA, and we did nothing with websites. And for us, it was more like Axis. We did some Axis coding, which I mean, I don't know if it's even useful now. We use Tableau, whatever. So it's like, man, that did nothing for me. But I'm sure that as I start getting into business, it'll come into that. And so, have you gotten your postgraduate school yet? Are you doing it? Interested in doing it?
I have not done it. I thought about it, and then I pursued just getting a job, right? So there's like the natural transition out of the military. You fall like steering committees, right? Who I love as a as a transition resource. But that's kind of one of the things he always talks about is going to get your MBA. I know quite a few people who did. My thing was I was going to use some resources, so I used Hiring Our Heroes corporate fellowship program and just talking to people. And my whole thing was I was going to try and land a job. If I was unsuccessful, or if I found one that I didn't like that much and it was just kind of paying the bills, I'd go get my MBA. If I found one I liked, or the income was right, or whatever, certain criteria, that I would just pursue that. And so that's fortunately for me, or unfortunately maybe in the future, I don't know, but at least for now, fortunately, I found one I really like that pays me really well. And going to get an MBA right now, I think would be just maybe at best a lateral movement. I don't know if I would even get any forward progress from it in my career.
And are you really liking your company, or with that, are you really liking your company?
So the company's good. So I work for Amazon Web Services. I work as a consultant on strategic accounts, right? So there's only 20 customers that we have. It's the top 20 customers for AWS. And I like the company in that there's just a million things to go do. It's very similar to the Army in that it's this massive company, bunch of different teams, like you and I, in the DoD sphere or whatever, right? But like, we know what each other did on our job, but like we never would have interacted in a day-to-day, right? Or likely not. It's much the same way at AWS, right? Like there's however many people, I will never meet the vast majority of them. And so like you get that perspective. And then like the things that maybe you don't like is if you're looking for that like small business, like really like everyone's on the same team, which everyone is on the same team, but like everyone, that kind of like very personal thing. That's different there, right? And there's different teams as well, though. So, like for instance, because I'm on the tech consulting side and really project management, I'll come together with some project team for 3 or 4 months. We build whatever, or we do whatever, and then we go our separate ways. I go manage some other project, and they all go on to their own other projects, right? And then I'll have a whole new team. And so it's kind of like every 3 months I'm meeting, 3 or 4 months, you're meeting new people, new teams, doing this norming, forming, all that stuff. So I love that because it's not boring. I'm doing something new, right? I'm not in a rut because I'm just doing some new project. Like, I guess I can't really talk too much about the projects that I do, but it's wildly different across the board each time.
I mean, it's okay. Hey, Jeff, it's okay, Jeff. Yeah, just in case Jeff Vessel was hearing, you never know, right? So that's cool. Have you seen any? Because I'm very interested in this, since I'm not in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Have you seen any of the people that are like bouncing around jobs trying to get promotions, or is that starting to slow down?
So I think that's slowing down now. When I first got out, which was, I guess I started my internship in January of 2022, so I kind of count that when I got out, and then I fully got out in May of 2022, so a year and 5 months ago. Back in January, even when I first got out in May, it was like everyone you talked to was like, all right, dude, you're here for a year or two. You'll do your initial foray into the FANG companies or the MANG companies now, right? And then you'll bounce to the next one. You'll go to the Apples or the Googles or whatever, right? You'll do a couple years there, and then you'll bounce back. And that was just like the normal realm, right? Because it is not like, they're not kidding. You don't get paid more by being promoted within. You get paid more by coming from outside for a lot of reasons, right? A lot of good reasons as well. But, last year tech got hit really, really hard. And I got super lucky to not be laid off. I think like a fifth of my team did, and I managed to hang on. And it might not have been a fifth, it might have been like a sixth or something. I don't know. I don't remember the numbers. But anyways, it was a decent chunk got laid off. And, and I think with all these layoffs, right, it's just harder to find a job in the big companies because they're not hiring right now. They're in a pause. And so I think, to answer your question in a super roundabout way, a year minus ago, that was all the time. People were bouncing back and forth. That was like the norm. And right now, I think we're going into kind of a stationary phase where it's a little bit slower movement. Is what it feels like.
Cool. It's good to hear, because I think that a lot of service owners need to hear that, right? And I want to highlight that often whenever I talk to people in the corporate world, because you got to be aware of it. It's like we're used to, I've had my same job for 20 years. Yeah. I don't care how much you change units. You're still wearing the same uniform. You just go, you brush it up a little bit, and you do another task, right? Yeah. It's more of a changing in task, not changing in profession. And I think that's I want people to be cognizant that you need to be more equally adapt to change, but for a different purpose, Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities, but I think kind of where maybe I disagree slightly with that is there's still in the military, right, every 2 or 3 years you're changing units, right? Generally, I don't know, maybe unit is different, right? But like I was 3 years in Fort Stewart. I was in one battalion the whole time, but I could have maybe bounced around battalions. Then I went off to Fort Bragg, and I could have taken some other jobs that I turned down because I was getting out. But like I could have done a year and a half in my first battalion. I could have gone to another one, or taken company or whatever it was, right? And so you can move around pretty quickly. And while the job, it's new teams, it's new all this stuff, right? So the job may be similar. It doesn't necessarily isn't the same. But I think it's very similar. Like if I was to go from AWS to Google, right? It's just another team, but we're generally doing the same thing, right? It's technology consulting of some kind. So
that's kind of
a complete change. Yeah,
that's what I thought. I thought people there was a lot more movement in not precisely profession, but in duties, right? But maybe now you're saying there's a lot more similarity. Doing exactly what you're doing, just doing it in Google, doing it in Meta.
That's how the people that I know that were making moves it was more on that realm. But there was plenty of people who were making, going from my world, so I'm an engagement manager is my role, which is really just kind of project consulting for customers, right? And then you can go into a sales job, or you can go into a architecting job, or there's all things you can go from there. But it's very similar again to like, hey, I started off as an infantryman, maybe I want to go be a Green Beret, or do some of these other like specialty jobs, right, that you kind of start in some place, which I had no desire to go do. But like it's like you can go specialize, you can go do some route,
right?
That's pretty common as well.
Got it. So like to jump into a little bit of the finances, what was your financial upbringing? What did you hear? What were your thoughts around finance as you were growing up?
Yeah, I think I was actually talking to my brother not that long ago about this, but I think we kind of, as a family, just didn't talk about finances too much. Right? Like, we just didn't. And it wasn't good or bad. We definitely weren't, like, poor. I don't think we were we were more on the wealthier side than not. But I think we were probably very, very middle class. But we just didn't really talk about finances until probably, I think we were in high school, and my mom likes to bring this up. And it was phenomenal that she did. I kind of had forgotten about it until somewhat recently, but she went into like I don't remember how much it was, but kind of like an allowance situation where we had to earn it, right? We had to do our little chores and do whatever, but then we also stopped, she wasn't going to get us clothes, or she wasn't going to pay for us to go to the movies or any of this stuff, right? And so like all of a sudden we did this switch that I think taught me how to manage money when I was still living at home quite a bit more, because there was only one source of income, and it was my whatever it was, $50 allowance or $100 a month or whatever it was, right? And so while there was some stuff that they would pay for, like gas, I think was gas for me driving to high school, like my senior year of high school, like they would pay for gas for me to get to school because my mom didn't have to drive anymore, which is nice. But most of the time it was, if I wanted to buy something, I had to be my money, and so then I had to learn how to manage that.
Yeah. Did you ever read any finance books for kids?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
No, I was not.
Now, being where you are, do you wish you would have?
I think so. I really do. I think there's a lot of time in my early career, especially like as a young lieutenant, that I missed on by not knowing how to invest, or even knowing that investing was really a thing. And I didn't really learn about it until college, right? Again, I got lucky with like a business degree. And then I can talk about, I got really lucky with a friend of mine who had graduated 4 years. So like they graduated the year I started. So we missed each other by the summer, right?
Yeah.
But a bunch of the people in my ROTC program knew him. He gets out the Army after 4 years as I'm commissioning. He's starting off as kind of an advisor, and some people put me in touch with him, and then I just kind of was like, here's my money, do your thing, dude. I know I need to know about finances. I don't have time. Like I got like, infantry school and ranger school and airborne school and all these things you got to go deal with. Like I don't have time to like figure out finances. Here's my money, go deal with it. And they've been managing my money ever since. And so I just know I got super, super lucky with that relationship that most people do not have the ability to fall into, right?
Yeah.
So, or if they do, it's like someone who's just like ripping them off, right? That's pretty common. I know you talk about it quite a bit, that, a lot of financial advisors are going to take your money and charge some exorbitant fee. And I just got super lucky in that the guys that I met up with did not do that.
Yeah. And to your point, I think that it's, I'm a big believer in this now. It's like, I can scam. The more I'm learning about finance, I can scam anybody with anything. You can get scammed with a credit card, with a real estate, with life insurance, with financial advice. You can get scam people left and right. And unless in your position you trusted somebody, he just so happened to be a good person to trust, it's worked out, right? and you and I have talked a lot about this, that it's really about the education of like, okay, if you're going to give your money to somebody, at least you got to be willing to understand it a little bit, to challenge it and know that it's not getting screwed over, right?
Yeah. And that's where, like, frankly, again, going back to my just pure luck in this world, at least a couple of years ago, or 10 years ago at this point, like, I did not have that kind of. I just kind of generally knew that Mark was a person that people liked. Shout out to Mark, of course, but people thought he was a good dude, and he was kind of getting his first start in the world. And I knew that I needed to invest some money, and we formed a little alliance where I was one of his original customers to help him out, and at least that's how I remember the situation. I don't know. I haven't talked to Mark in a long time about that back in the day, but I think that's how it played out. And then he's been managing my money ever since, and I've just been extremely fortunate to watch my, put my stuff on autopilot with him until I started learning it myself. And then I was like, oh, this is fantastic. It's actually all the things that we should have done.
Good. And so now that you know a lot more about finance, do you feel your money is on track, on the right place, and it's doing the right things?
100%. Yeah. Yeah, very much so. So, kind of the things that he put me into, big time TSP off the bat, specifically the Roth TSP, which was huge. When I deployed, he helped me. I don't remember the program anymore, but that one where you can put more money into it, and, some of that stuff when you deploy. He coached me through
the savings deposit plan, which is, I just talked to somebody who's in Iraq. I was like, go do this right now. We could talk about finance after you do this. Yeah,
exactly. It's like, for us in the military, it's like one of those things when you deploy, it's high yield savings, right? It's the same thing. It's just a need to, right? So he put me into that Roth TSP off the bat. He put me into just maxing out my Roth IRA every year, right? I just gave him I don't remember what it was back then, $6,000 divided by 12 a month, and that just got moved over there. And then we did a few $100 into a managed fund, right? That he managed, just mostly just a bunch of indexes.
Good.
And not mostly, it was all just indexes and some bonds, basically. Good. But I think I was doing $600 a month off of that. So I was kind of just taking my little lieutenant paycheck. I was single, putting roughly $1,200 after once it hit my bank account. $1,200 just disappeared, and then I just lived off the rest. And then again, I started that when I was a lieutenant living at Fort Benning, doing all my training, right? So I was in the field for 3 out of 6 months anyways, a week on, week off. I couldn't have spent the money if I wanted to, right? I would have been outrageous if I'd found a way to spend that amount of money. And so it was the perfect way to start. And so then by the time I got to the line, right, in Fort Stewart, I'd already, been I can live off this, without this $1,200 a month or whatever it was. I think that was roughly the numbers. I can live without this money every month. Therefore, I will continue to do so. And then I got promoted to O2 right afterwards. And so I upped it a little bit and kept going and just kind of did the same thing. And when you're that young, I was 21, and you start putting that money away, you don't need to put in a ton to get over time to grow pretty exponentially.
Yeah. And it's funny because I'm sure that there's plenty of lieutenants that did blast that money, or left it doing nothing, right? So it's great that a choice that seems, clearly wasn't difficult for you, but it would seem difficult to many, actually becomes very easy, especially because you were doing it based off 01 pay. By the time you're 03, you're like, whatever, who cares, right? It's
you've just been living without it for so long. It's it doesn't even count. At least that's how I felt about it, right? It was just I just know at the first of the month, that's money is going to disappear. And I think I had it set up to be on the first half of it went away, and on the 15th, the other half went away with my next paycheck. So it just was what it was. And honestly, I'm a huge fan of that kind of investing style, right? You figure out where you can live without, or you start when you're young and then you just go. But the difference would be if I started now and I'm 30 versus if I started when I was 21, right? $1,200 now is going to feel way different in 20 years when I retire, or 30 years when I retire. I would have to probably double down to get to the same amount.
Right.
And I have my little calculator in front of me.
Right. And I talk to guys right now, my age, and I'm like, hey guy, you need to retire or to not have to work, you have to start saving $1,000 a month. And they're like, how do I do that? I have 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I know. Sorry, let's figure it out. But if he would have been doing it when he was 21, all of a sudden, by this time, he would have counted for everything in life, right? And that's kind of what we're talking to people. It's the sooner you start doing it, the sooner easier it is, right? Just like fitness. You figure out that you got to wake up at 4 a.m, 5 a.m, whatever, to go work out. Well, let's be real. I like 6. You figure out what you need to do, and it becomes a habit, right? You're we spoke about that. You're not a morning person.
I am not a morning
person. So it's figure out what works, but you have to create that habit. Yep. With that, you put the value in education, and I'm super excited to talk about this. Tell us about your project, and
Yeah.
the thing that we're talking about, you know?
Yeah, so I'll talk about I'll start with a couple things, right? And I'll talk about why. I'll start with the project, and then I'll talk about how I got into it, right? Because I think it's kind of a good story for a lot of people. But the project itself, right? We call it the My First Finance book series. It's an actual business now, My First Finance book, registered in Texas. But the way it works, we have 2 different book series. One illustrated series for kids, 3 books, and then one we call like ages 8 to 12 roughly, right? And then we have a coloring book series for younger kids. We like say like 6 to 8, kind of like the pre kids, right? And so you get little lessons in each one, right? Each chapter is a lesson. They follow along. Yep, they're right there. And so nice. the left being obviously coloring book 1, middle one being illustrated book 1, and then on the right we kind of started writing some activity books, some things of that nature, right? So that one's actually a budgeting book. It's got like 50 pages of little pre-made budgets in there, right? So
while you're talking, the companion book, or you said activity book or companion book?
Nah, I have it probably labeled as both at some different point. Yeah, the companion book is what it is up there. So you're on the right one. There should be a picture in here with the page. Actually, I haven't been on. I think I was telling you over the weekend, we switched websites slightly. So this is the older one I haven't been on in a while, and that's okay. I guess the job done. But so anyways, the books themselves, right? So book 1, you kind of learn the basics. Chapter 1, what is money, right? Like money is something I use to go buy things that I want, right? And for a kid, we use like the example of a candy bar, right? So like page 1 is like, hey, I want to go buy this thing at the store, and the guy says you don't have enough money, right? And so then you have to learn about what money is, and by the end of it, you have enough, you have your $1.50 to get the Snickers bar or whatever, right? Yeah. And then we kind of go through the rest of the book, and it's like, what is saving, right? And so you save in a piggy bank, and then you learn about the magic piggy bank, right? So it's like a high yield savings account because it's just free money sitting in your savings, right? Yeah. And that's and then we go into some small or you go into like building a budget, right? And then we go into some small business stuff, right? So starting a lemonade stand, kind of learning about what the difference between like a personal budget and like a business budget or an expense sheet and all that stuff is. And we wanted to start there because we want to get to like the stock market, right? So you can't talk about what the stock market is without defining what a business is. And so we started there. Then we started talking about what a loan is, right? So you go into like investing in your friend's business, which is probably something that you can or can't do if you're little kids, right? But it's just a learning tool, right? It's like, hey, let me understand a loan through something that I can conceptualize. My buddy's starting a lawnmower company, but he needs like $10 for gas for the lawnmower. I'll lend him the $10 and I'll get $12 back in the next month or 2 months, right? After he earns some income, right? And then we go into the stock market, which I think is kind of like one of the basics that's important, right? And it's like you're in your little class, you and your 30 kids are in class. Everyone brings in a couple bucks. The teacher becomes your broker or your fund manager, whatever you want to reference, right? Mm-hmm. The teacher then goes invests in some lawn mowing companies and some lemonade stands, right? Yeah. Some of the stands do good, some of them don't. And then, eventually you do some dips and you come back up, right? So we wanted to really highlight that it's not always up. There are ups and downs, but though historically it will trend up. And then we go into the last book, which kind of really hammers down some outside concepts that you maybe wouldn't associate with finance off the hand, right? And so one of the big ones that we believe in is community service, community giving. And so we have a whole chapter around like why like rising tides lift all boats, right? Like why building the community around you is so important, because if you're the only one on top, then you can only get so high. But if everyone's coming with you, you're making the world a better place and also helping yourself at the same time, right? Yeah. So that's a huge one for us. And so a lot of what we do is like a lot of why we started this was around that chapter, to be quite honest, right? And then the next chapter, we go into education, why continuing to learn is so important. How school will teach you some stuff, but you need to be able to go learn on your own. You need to go watch YouTube videos or podcasts or do whatever it is, right, to figure out some more stuff in your life and what interests you, right? And then we kind of go into 2 final concepts. One, we really wrap the whole thing up with compound interest. And really just hammer it in, right? So we kind of talk about it throughout the rest of the books, but we hit a whole chapter on compound interest. We do the traditional, how do I turn an apple into an orchard through compound interest, right? And then the last one we talk about, like, after reading all 10 previous chapters, right, in the 3 books, does the definition of money change? I think it does, right? And it's kind of my own personal growth from, hey, money used to be something that I used to buy goods and items, and now money is something I use to buy time. Yeah. Right. And so that's what the last chapter is kind of about, is like, hey, you need to dream. And like, it's important to dream because then you can make decisions today that will affect your dreams in the future. Right. So if I want to be whatever, retired at 45 is my dream, right? And so now I need to make decisions today that will allow me to do that. And then so I'm also making things like buying time. So I'm, say I pay someone to run a podcast studio instead of doing it myself. And so I take those 4 hours that I could have done and I go do something productive that earns me more money, because that earning me more money now gets me closer to my dream in the future. And so that's kind of what the last chapter is. It really brings the whole series together. And so I know it's kind of it was a deep kind of walkthrough. I know I stumbled through it. I'm sure we can edit out bits and pieces of it, but that's kind of where, from start to finish, that's what the series is about.
No, and I actually don't think we need to edit anything, because that's I really value your explanation of the whole series, right? Because I've read the books. They're excellent. I wish I would have read them earlier, and just for everybody knows, I actually, when I get the book from Ben, I lay in bed and I crush it in about 5 minutes. Mostly because I understand the subject, right? It's like, oh man, 5 minutes of reading this book. But for kids, it's like so awesome. And I love that we spoke about something that I generally don't like. I don't like mutual funds, but the reason that we put it there, it just makes sense. An ETF is a mutual fund, right? Like, let's explain it in the simplest way possible, which is huge. Which, let me ask you a question. Is your dream actually to retire 45, or do you have another dream, and are you open to share it?
Yeah. My kind of like my financial dream, retired is not the right word, but I want to be able to choose where I'm working and not feel like my income matters, like my income from that W-2, right? I think I would probably I wouldn't survive if I were just to quit working at 45, but I'd love to be able to be like, okay, I'm going to go work for some nonprofit full time and I get like $1,000 stipend and like, whatever, I don't care, right? Because I have my investments that are actually paying for my life. Yeah. That's my actual dream, right? And so
that I agree. Very similar for me. That's awesome. And my other question was, so that was your dream, and I love what you said about raising tides, lift all boats, right? Which is something that you and I have talked about, whether it's with my financial project, whether it's your book. It's like the whole point here is like, how many more people can we get wealthy, right? Yeah. And let's do it all together, because it matters, right? And there's so many countless. It is a complicated world to distill. Right. And, to this, it still blows my mind. Somehow I've been doing the Instagram for now a year, and somebody will message me, why are you suggesting more credit cards, or why are you suggesting balance transfers? And I'm just like, oh, buddy. I'm like, all right, fine. And that, most of the time I'm really nice. This weekend I was not very nice to that one guy, but I was like, I'll make a point. I was like, balance transfers are good. Just because you don't need them doesn't mean they're bad. It's like, how do we educate, right? But I love the books. Just since we're here, where can people find these books?
Yeah, it's a couple different places, right? And so the first one that's just the easiest for everybody is Amazon. They're all on Amazon. That's probably going to be your most expensive way if you want to buy them. If you're thinking you just want to buy all 3 books for the illustrated size, or all 5 books for the coloring books, Amazon's actually going to be slightly more expensive, and that's just, just to peek behind the hood, like Amazon takes a huge cut of what we produce, right? It costs them like $250 to print one of those books, and then we sell them for, I think, $17 right now. Amazon takes like $13.50 of that, or whatever the math comes out to be, and then I make like $1.50 a book, right? And so Amazon takes a huge cut there. The other way that is a little more economical for everybody is through our website. So we have the myfirstfinancebook.store. You also have myfirstfinancebook.com, right? So you had pulled up the myfirstfinancebook.com. I'm going to be in the process of actually changing that domain to point at the one that's at myfirstfinancebook.store. Yeah. But, I get my author discount or author payments, right? So I can buy the books at actual cost and then sell them from there. It's through a different program called Ingram Spark, if anyone's heard of it. And so we can offer the books a little bit cheaper for everyone. And so that's the other way. It's just a little slower of a process, right? Because we need a little, unless you want to pay extra for shipping, but you can buy all 3 books. We're selling them for $45 versus on Amazon, where you get them for about $52 before shipping. Unless you have Prime, obviously, right? So you save a little bit of money coming through us. Yeah. And so I just wanted to offer both options.
I just went to my first financial book at that store, and I love it. Right here, we have the green collar finance guy popping up.
Lawrence?
Yeah, there we go, Lawrence. If you guys don't know Lawrence, go find him on social media. This will be like, just throw a plug since he was here. But yeah, these books are excellent. What led you to come up with these book ideas?
Yeah, so it's kind of a couple prong thing that happened right to me. So I'll start with I guess to your military audience, of course, maybe we'll all understand this one, right? So I was in Afghanistan at the very end, right? It was the Operation Allies Refuge. I ended up taking the last plane out with some of the other 82nd folk, right? And so that kind of left me with a little bit of what one might call trauma or PTSD.
Wait,
we call
you were
moral
actually
injury.
in HKIA?
Yeah, I took the last plane out.
I had no idea about that. How have I been talking to you this long? I didn't know that. It's a big deal.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
Cool is relative term. So.
Well,
but
it's a good point. Relative. It's a great experience. Sorry you dealt with it because it's very tough. I have no doubt. But it's I mean, we joined the military to do those kind of difficult things, right? We didn't join the military to do walks in the park, you know.
I was doing my job for sure. Okay. And so it's going back to, if we go back to the beginning of the conversation, like what I did in the Army, I was kind of the acting S3, maybe shared capacity with some other folk for Geronimo, running this through the South Gate onto HKIA for a while before doing some other stuff. And so long story short, right, we leave HKIA, we come back, probably like a lot of folk, and I had a lot of trouble sleeping afterwards. Like I didn't really... Some people had different versions of sleeping problems. Mine was not like waking up in the middle of the night, right? I have not had that problem, fortunately. Mine's going to sleep. And so I found myself with a whole bunch of time, everyone, wife's gone to bed and, it's 2 a.m. and I'm staring at the wall. Like, I'm like, what the hell do I do with my time? Right. Like, and I was like, I could just sit here or I could find some productive stuff to do. And so this is back in, end of 2021, trying to figure out my life, trying to figure out what's going on. I kind of started drinking a little bit to try and go to sleep. And then I realized, like, dude, that's not like that's a path that I could go down that would not end well. And I could feel it starting. And so I kind of just stopped that. And so what I ended up doing was I never really been a big YouTube guy, to be quite honest, right? I'd never really been, I listen to podcasts on the way to work, but I know a lot of people who let me watch like whatever YouTube video, like I was being like Netflix cat. But I started finding YouTube videos, educational. Right, so I started I wasn't watching like random stuff, but I was trying to find and learn new skills and do whatever. And I was also in the middle of my transition at that point, right? So I'm like interviewing, and so I'm trying to learn new stuff, go through. That's kind of how it starts, right? So then I start finding more finance related stuff. I'd already been interested in finance. Like I said, I've been listening to podcasts and stuff, but I really started like hammering down and just like learning as much as I could about personal finance because I found it really interesting, specifically real estate back then. So we ended up buying our first real estate investment property in Fayetteville. A few months later, not a few months, but like 6 months later, we found a property. We got our skin in the game on that first real estate investment from that capacity. And then continued learning really about personal finance as I got out. And so then generative AI hits, right? It's the next big thing. I work in tech. I've been out for a little bit. One of the things you realize when you get out, maybe not in your current job, but like when I got out of the line, right, is like I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning to get to my 5 o'clock meeting before PT, and then you're lucky to be home by 7 o'clock at night, right? And then you get home and you're just done for the day. For most of my Army career. And so what I realized when I got out as a civilian, like that's just not the case anymore. I kind of roll out of bed at like 8:45. I'm at my computer by 9. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I get off at 5 and that's okay. Or whenever I'm done with my meetings for the day, because I don't really have timeline. I just have tasks.
You don't PT?
Oh, I PT. I just do it at like 6 at night. Because that's what's better for me. I have my little garage gym. I go out there after work. But so long story short, I started having all this extra time. Generative AI came out. And so I started kind of marrying these two issues together. Right? Like I wanted to learn about Gen AI and I love personal finance and kind of like helping people. And I've been like kind of coaching some friends along the way. And at that point. And so we started using little ChatGPT to help us come up with some book ideas. We found this company called Midjourney that'll do images, right? I'm not an artist, but I know how to talk to a computer. And so we used Midjourney and then Photoshop, and then I brought on a really good friend of mine, Nick, who was actually really good at artistry. And so we would kind of make some baseline images through Midjourney. Nick would come in, touch them up, add pieces here and there to get the images that we have in the actual books. Mm-hmm. And so we started putting 2 and 2 together down there, right? And so it's kind of the piece I wanted to hit on really is that I used my trauma, my inability to sleep at night, right? And instead of like drinking or doing any of that stuff, I found productive ways to use that time or to use that energy, right? That trying to turn that negative into a positive energy, and that's kind of what the brainchild of this was, right? And it was a lot of research that led to it beforehand, and kind of just trying to decide like what I wanted to do with my life in this, I guess, time that I had.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if I wasn't on HKIA and if I hadn't had these issues, I probably would not have started this at all, because I'd be just like hanging out doing whatever, in a normal time.
Yeah, which is huge, man. And I think we spoke. I've said it here before, right? Things happen for us, not to us, right? Mm-hmm. So you had to be an HKIA. You had to deal with that. You had to experience that to bring you to this, right? And maybe this is what gets you to your dream, which is awesome. So you actually met Lee in Afghanistan?
No, I didn't meet Lee until OAR. So I know, Lee Operation Allies Refuge Foundation, started by an awesome dude named Joe Loud, who has brought on some team members. Lee being the president of our board, which I know you all know through the EOD community. Mm-hmm. And then I came on a little bit later. So Joe founded OAR with another group of Marines who were on HKIA. I think the official found date was August 31st, 2022, or maybe like right after, but basically the 1 year anniversary. Yeah. And they had a little Instagram page beforehand where they were sharing people's stories from HKIA and kind of like generally sharing the story. And that's where I'd found him, right? And again, like kind of looking for community. I was going through my own mental health struggles. The 1 year anniversary was like really, really tough on a lot of us, myself included. Mm-hmm. I made the traditional mistake that we all hear about, is like I got back from Afghanistan, and from that deployment, which was particularly traumatic for a lot of reasons, and also to a lot of people, right? And then 3 months later, I was out of the Army, right?
Yeah,
so like
perfect.
I didn't, I left all of the, everyone I knew and just kind of went somewhere else. At least me and my wife, right? But my general like military support structure, and so I was looking for a sense of community, found them on Instagram. Kind of chatted it, talking, and then Joe ended up bringing me on as part of the team as well. And so that's kind of how I got involved with Operation Allies Refuge Foundation, and have been learning a lot about, all sorts of stuff. But moral injury in particular is what we've been researching with them.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
So let me try to bring this all back together.
Yeah.
You're a military guy. You got to go to HKIA. Moral injury left you to have issues at home, right? You decided to choose to not drink, which you're a quitter. You should have just done, said be a man. You just be an alcoholic.
Right?
Yeah.
I also quit tobacco pretty soon after I got out of the Army too. So talk about hard,
Yeah. So you quit on the military, you quit on alcohol, you quit on tobacco, and you find yourself tribeless, dealing with issues, and you're taking this super crappy time. I'm not going to say, like whatever. It's a crappy moment. You converted it to a positive, created finance books for kids, and now you join OAR.
Yeah.
That's like summed up. That is so freaking cool. And I thought you were cool already. Now you're way cooler, which is super awesome, man. And then I'm highlighting it that way for a reason, right? Because I've talked about my problems. Now we talk about yours, and it's like, guys, you deal with shit. It sucks. Life sucks. Now, are you going to choose, like I quote that I'm a guy, a demarcation line, right? You chose, I could either A, be an alcoholic, not sleep, ruin my life, my relationship, blah, 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 blah. Or you do something good with it. And you did, which is so freaking cool. And I know you're causing massive impacts with the books, right? It's probably we're not going to feel it for years, right? At some point, right? Hopefully, right? At some point, some kids are going to be like, oh, I read this first book, or a father's like, my son... how cool, I could just imagine it. My son read your book, and then he Googled ETFs and taught me how to finance, how to do finance, which would be, I'm sure it's going to happen, right? Yeah. But now you're an OER, and, somehow now we're doing multiple things together. And so I know you already mentioned moral injury. I know it's important. I had Lee explain it to me because I had no freaking clue. What is moral injury?
Yeah, so I think the important thing to know off the hand is that moral injury is not defined in like the DSM-5, right, which is the document that describes psychological issues and trauma, right? And so that's one of the things that we want to help influence, is what that is. But moral injury, we think and are leaning towards, is a subset of PTSD. But if you think of traditional PTSD, there's usually some kind of trauma-based event that maybe puts your body into a fight or flight. Mm-hmm. You wake up sweating, or you have like a very traumatic event that you can reference and be like, that was it. And you whatever it is, right? Like that's generally PTSD that we all kind of know about it from,
right,
everyone's past, and we've been in war for 20 years. We can kind of know what PTSD is. Moral injury is not necessarily that there was like one event. You weren't necessarily in fear for your life. You weren't in a gunfight and stuff. Like, I never fired my rifle. I got shot at a few times by like snipers, and it was just like, oh, I think that was maybe like a round went by. Like, that's kind of strange, right? Like, that's like the extent of my like physical danger. But moral injury is like you see something and you can't interact, and it just goes against every like fiber of your being to an extent, right? So like we read all these stories about Abbey Gate, and you see, right, obviously a lot of the people in OAR were at Abbey Gate. I was in and out of Abbey Gate a few times, and you hear the stories of like some dude throws his baby in the canal and the Marines just watch the baby drown, or it's in the sea wire, right? And it's like you just can't do anything about it. You're like, wow, that's shitty. Let me deal with that later. Or, you know, for us, it would be a lot of people would come up to our gate. Our gate was very specifically not individuals coming through. Like, that was like the Abbey Gates of the world. Or the HKIA, we had like organizations, right? We would bring through like 200 people in a organized bus kind of situation from like some embassy or something, right? And so when these individuals would come up to the gate, we'd be like, you got to go away. And they'd be like, well, the Taliban are going to kill me if I leave because I snuck through the Taliban checkpoints to get here. And we're like, well, that's tough, dude. And then you see them go away and you hear a couple of gunshots later on. And you're like, wow, like that's a bummer. And so that's kind of like what moral injury is, right? It's like you just can't really do anything to solve whatever happened, but it wasn't that you were an active participant, right? Some of the other kind of examples that get brought up, though, too, are like say you're in a gunfight, and a very traditional example, right? You're in a gunfight, I don't know, Baghdad, right, or whatever, right? And you're shooting, someone's shooting at you. You see movement out the left side. You're in this hyper state of affairs. You turn, you start engaging, and it was like some woman who was running across the street trying to get out of the line of sight, and you just were shooting because you thought everyone was shooting at you. It's not. It just is what it is, right? That would be another kind of version of moral injury that's really connected with that PTSD. Like, that's really, it's part, you're in that hyper state of mind, and then you also do something that you're like, that was not good. Or like your buddy did that, and you're the one who witnessed it, and you're like, oh, like that's all really not good, right? That's kind of moral injury, which makes it different than PTSD.
Wow.
Or maybe more subset, more specific to PTSD is kind of what our research is leading us towards, but we're working on doing some like more formal and official research right now. That's one of our missions at OAR.
Awesome, dude. That's huge. And I'll say this: as I started getting connected with OAR, I thought it was support for the allies that you guys were bringing back. Yeah. But obviously that's not it. And
it's part of the mission as well. I mean, we do that as well, but the main focus is not. Like, we have kind of 3 pillars, and that's one of them.
Yeah. For the whole audience, what's bringing us together is, but hopefully by the time this podcast released, my beer has come out. Not my beer, Salty Turtle's beer, and we brewed it together. And I love Salty Turtle. It's great brewery in Holly Ridge for all the Marines over there. Well, I guess the Army guys from Bragg also go down there, but they have a rule: if you do they do a beer with somebody, you have to donate. And we chose OAR, right? So whenever this podcast comes out, if there's still any beer, I hope you guys go and drink all of it so that, hey, Salty, so that we can can it next year and we can help out people, right? So this money, for what you're telling me, besides research for moral injury, where else is the money going?
Yeah, so we have kind of, like I said, we have 3 pillars, right? So moral injury research, which is actually kind of shockingly expensive, like when you get in the scientific community and like getting stuff published, it's shocking. But the other things that we do, right? So we are supporting that original mission, right? We're helping our Afghan allies, some who are still in Afghanistan. We're kind of more partnering with other organizations that are, more on the black side that we don't want to talk about too much, but like they're working to get people out still. Right, really? We're partnering with them. Yeah, there's a lot of that still happening. Getting people out. There's a lot of still. There's someone you might want to follow. Her name's Beth Bailey for your audience. She's a reporter who's really staying up on what's happening in Afghanistan right now, and it's pretty intense. It's not a good time to be living in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of reprisal killings and things of that nature still happening, and so there's many organizations working to get those people out. And so we're kind of we partner with them. But on the flip side, we also are working with organizations that are here, as well as just our community of Afghans who have made it out, doing things like educational learning, right? Like learning to read English for the kids.
Are you teaching them finance?
Not yet. We're not starting. We're not there yet. That's the next step. Working to help people get jobs.
Books.
Yeah, right.
Government contracting. You start educating and sell your own books. There you go.
Yeah, that's not a conflict of interest. No way.
No.
But
I mean, you will get in trouble because you're not a congressman. So,
they got to get elected to get out of that kind of trouble. But that's okay.
yeah.
So that's like one of our other pillars, right? That's one of the reasons we were founded, is to continue that mission. But then the third one that's huge to us is building a community, right? Not just OAR veterans, but all veterans of Afghanistan, all veterans of the GWAT. We've done some partnerships with like PB Abade, which I know you've worked with as well. But we want to build our vision in the future is like a center of excellence, if you will, right? Like kind of take one of those more officer military terms, but a place for veterans to come and talk about their traumas, deal with their traumas, and be a member of a community. Post-military, or in the military, right? But people who understand, because there's only, there was like 3,000 of us on HKIA, and there's probably about 3,000 people who know like what we kind of really did and saw there, and that's kind of it. So, just weird, man.
Yeah,
that was a weird deployment. I'll say there's a lot of people who are like, Ranger regimented deployed 15 times and were like doing their time on the line, and they're like, that was the hardest deployment, or that was the craziest deployment I've ever been on, right? We didn't shoot our guns once, at least not in Geronimo, right? And so it was a tough one for sure. And so we're trying to build a community to support that.
How long were you guys there? Like what, a month max?
Not even. We were there for 2 weeks. I think I landed August 16th and left the night of August 31st.
That's crazy.
Maybe it's the morning. I don't remember. It was literally the last plane, right? Like we were out.
So you were in that plane with the general, and
I don't think this is classified. There was more than one plane that kind of left simultaneously, right? And so I was on. Basically, we had pulled security around the entire airfield, right? And so we were far side security in my battalion, which was like 100 people, dude, at the time, right? Like most people were gone. Like we were, if someone had come to get us, like there was nothing. There was no stopping, right? We had like every aircraft you could imagine flying overhead, and I had to like listen to I had like 4 different radios on, because we'd send all the RTOs home. So it was like me and the battalion commander running around, and I was like air crew and brigade and the division and all these other channels, and I was just listening to these things. So like the AC-130 was using the green lasers, which I don't know if you've ever seen them downrange use the green laser, but it's kind of creepy, right? You're like, what the hell is that? Yeah. So like they lazed these people that were trying to jump the fences to come get on our planes, right? Because everyone knew that generally we were leaving, right?
Yeah.
And so they'd be like lazing people, and it seemed like all the jumpers were coming from our side, and so we'd have to send these little teams out, like just with praying there was another S-vest, like, hey, go zip tie that dude to some fence or whatever it is, right? Like lock that dude up, so they're not trying to get on our plane as we're trying to like get out of here. And then as we were like taking off, right, we're like can like kind of look out the window, and you see all the the fireworks going off in the city. Because they, obviously they announced that the war was over, right?
Yeah.
Like we were gone. Yeah, they won. We were gone. And so all the fireworks started going off across the city as we're taking off, and it was sketch, man. Like we were all just sitting there waiting for, we thought another SS for sure was coming. Like, I don't know. I couldn't imagine someone was not going to take another shot at us. And then as we were taking off, like there'd been intermittent people shooting at the aircraft coming in, right? So every once in a while you'd see the flares go off as the craft were coming in. And we were just sitting there waiting for someone to take one of the planes out as we were leaving. I was just like, this is the worst. This is miserable.
Dude, that is what a wild story. And I mean, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing your story, because it's there's not enough mention of it. Like you said, 3,000 guys and gals that were there is like, it's literally, we're talking what? Not even the full population of Camp Leatherneck, right? Like a tiny speck of people was there and dealt with that, and it was very tough. So I'm glad that you guys are doing something good, and I'm glad that I can be part of it. Hopefully bring you guys a ton of money to support that awesome, effort, right? That's it.
We got a lot of places to use it. We got a lot of big plans.
And you and I have spoken about it, that money doesn't buy happiness, but in this case it buys research. Yep. It definitely buys education. It definitely buys opportunities. It definitely buys experiences. Yep. So we need to go make a ton of money for insert whatever, right? It's only, and I'm sure we both met them. There's the incredibly wealthy people that are doing awesome things with their money, and there's also the incredibly wealthy people that are just sitting at home and looking at their accounts with a bunch of zeros. And it's like, well, you're a loser. If that's what you want to be, that's lame. That's not what we want to be. So
exactly,
man, that is really great. And the huge different shift into the whole world of what you did. And your mission in finance. Now, where do you see where do you guys see the finance books going? I'm assuming the project is not done. What is like the end point with it?
Yeah. So, product's never going to be done. Of course, it's always going to be a work in progress. The thing that we just released over the weekend, though, that we're excited about, or at least generally released to the community, our next set of books was actually a lesson plans for teachers, and then like pre-made presentation slides. Yeah. So we have 2 tiers, right? So we have a free tier, so anyone can go on our website and download the free tier one, and then they can combine that free tier with their books. So say you're like a parent at home, you just want to like get a little more detail around the books, or like some questions to ask your kids, or some activity examples, right? All of that's in the free tier. And then the paid tier, right? It's a little more in depth. There's an actual like physical book that comes with it. The presentations are, it's like 160 slides, right? It's like one per, it's a section per chapter of the book. And really where we see the business growing in terms of, B2B selling or is business to business selling, is with the like homeschool curriculum. It's kind of like our intro. We're already making some strides there. The next one is after school or summer camp activity type camps, right? So we have some another few intros there that are kind of in the works right now that we're hoping to close here on soon. And the third one's kind of getting into actual school curriculum. So like we see ourselves working into like a social studies curriculum. We have some intro calls coming up in the next few weeks with people who are interested. Public schools is like our ideal mission, right? It's the hardest one to get into. Like getting into a public school curriculum is really, really hard. There's a lot of processes, paperwork, and all sorts of stuff. But that's really where we think the kids who like need this are going to be, right? They're going to be in public schools. And so we have to make sure we get a really good founding and sounding on all the other 3, right? So the third one being private schools, right? Which is a lot easier to work with and get into. And that's where we have our current conversations headed. We think we can get a good base there. It'll let us start talking to public school systems. And again, the ideal, like frankly to us, like I would sell at cost to public schools, because again, that's who we like wrote these to. Like we wrote it for the public school kid who doesn't have another example of like a financial basis anywhere around, and that's who we want to be like really using these books. Was in the ideal world. And so that's kind of where we think the future state of the business is, right? It's really not selling an individual book on Amazon. Like that doesn't really do much for us, but selling these bulk programs and the bulk projects, like that's where we get our future state.
Just curious, how fast could you print 1,000 books if somebody was like, I need 1,000 books right now?
I think I've never tried to get 1,000 books, right? But I can, in theory, about 2 weeks, I can get 1,000 books to anywhere in the country.
Okay, cool. I'm thinking because of going back to my thought process, right? Like, sure, listen, we can't get it to, public school system is going to take time, but can we create money and start donating them to libraries? Yeah. Right. Like,
So 100%. Actually, one of the things we did about 4 or 5 days ago, I just sent the copy because we got the final ones published on Ingram Spark we talked about earlier, which is slightly different than Amazon, though they kind of do the same thing. They're just not really business to consumer, right? They're more like you sell to libraries and places of that nature. But we got our books registered at the Library of Congress and then sent them our original copies. Which will then allow us to register within the Library of Congress. And so one of the things to get into a library, which is 100% where our thought has gone before, is like you have to be in the repository of books associated with the Library of Congress, which then opens you up to be able to talk to any of the libraries in the country because you're parsed, or I can't remember the right term now, right? But like they have a registration for you, and so libraries can order your book. And so we're there now, and that's 100% one of the things we want, right?
Yeah, that is awesome. Which freaking incredible, because this is a big mission. Is there an overlap at any point between OAR and my first finance book?
So the overlap right now is just me, right? Because I'm on the board of OAR, and then I started my first finance book. In the future, potentially, but I'll be honest, like I personally don't like the idea of accidentally overstepping bounds or like generating income through OAR on accident, right? Like that would be like the worst case scenario to me. And so right now I have not, do not want to try and push anything over there.
Smart.
I do not. Separation church and state, dude. Like I really, there's nothing that like messes with people more than money. You know what I mean? And like that kind of thing would be an easy way to like accidentally, like someone donates to OAR thinking that they're helping OAR, and then all of a sudden OAR spends money on my books, and I'm like, oh, I just happen to be on the board. You know what I mean? Like, that is like something that I do not want to be a part of, and so I very specifically am not doing that right now.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that up because I don't know that. I have my visions of nonprofits, and I'm sure that you're on the list of people that I'm gonna reach out to whenever I get to that point.
Yeah.
Which is huge. And man, this has gone super well, and you have an incredible story. I want to ask you on a few things because money's a big thing, right? What are some things that you and your wife spend on that is like non-negotiable? It's like, we're gonna spend money on X. What is it? What is that?
Yeah. So big one for us right now is kind of like food, and not in terms of like I'm not trying not to smash McDonald's. Like I spend too much time doing that, so now I'm kind of fat, right? So I'm working on not being fat anymore.
Dude,
so,
you're really handsome, bro. Don't let anybody fool you. Yeah,
the beard hides it well, but yeah, we're working on that, and so like I'm not like holding back on buying like quality food, quality ingredients, and then also things that save me time though, right? So like for instance, I really like the Real Good Foods brand, right? Little shout out, they sell at Costco. They're a little bit on the pricier side, but they make things so much easier. So food is a big one for us. The other one's our dogs, right? Like we don't have kids. We have a lot of association to kids. They're family members and our neighbors, and all sorts of stuff, right? So it's not like I wrote kids book and just have like no access to like kids that are like reading it for us, right? But our two dogs we spend just way too much money on, and it is what it is. We love them more than anything, and that's okay.
I've seen Real Good Foods. That looks pretty good. Talk about the brand, right?
Yeah, the brand. They have a bunch of different like products, but their brand is really, really good. I'm actually a huge fan of them. They do like genuinely quality ingredients, but it's also like things that you can just throw in the air fryer for 5 minutes and it's like already pre-made, right? Or for me, like my lunches, like I don't really have a ton of time in the middle of the day, right? Because I work with people on the East Coast to the West Coast, and so like I don't stop meetings really in the middle of the day. My whole job is meetings anyways, and so it's like I need something I can just go chuck in the microwave that's like pre-made. Right. And I don't want to spend Sunday afternoon just like cooking, right? And so it's just really easy to use some of their stuff. Their brand I found that I really enjoy.
Wow, I'm looking at it now, and it's pretty. It looks really good. I'm eating mostly beef right now, but I'm definitely appeals to me. So that's cool. So time and food. What is something else that you spend on that you buy your time back?
I'll be honest, man. Like I don't have too much that I do that with right now because I don't. It's mostly comes down to like where we are, right? So like we moved to Houston, and we don't really know anyone here yet. Like we're kind of still new here, and so to me, like a lot of stuff that I would buy to like get my time back is not actually really worth it. Yeah. And so things that like are common that like maybe I used to do when I was in North Carolina, I had other things that I could be doing with my time, like mowing the lawn, right? And so what I've done now is I take that hour a week or whatever it is, and I just listen to a podcast, and it's my perfect time to like go and learn something new through a podcast. And so I just kind of find different ways, but I don't really have a lot that I'm spending money on that's going to save me time in my current stage in life because I just
got it.
But the other half too, not just to like say that I'm not doing that. The other half is a lot of what I'm doing is learning right now, right? And so for instance, I've spent way too many hours building a website that I could have paid someone like $100 to do, and it would have looked 10 times better, right? But now I know how to do it, and I'm learning about SEO, and I'm learning about like all these different things that I would like if I had just paid someone to do it, I wouldn't have learned about. So it's just kind of a different thing.
Which is kind of what we spoke about as like, I'm not going to commit the time to make my website. It's not going to happen, right?
That's why I thought of that example, right? Like it's a perfect example of something that like would make a ton of sense for me to go spend money on and just have someone do. But instead I was like, no, I'm going to learn this because I want to understand this skill and because I want to understand SEO and the back end of it. And to me, it's just kind of fun. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Yeah. And which is huge, right? Like I'm, we all pick and choose whatever it is, right? For me, I rather pay for that, but I'm also spending a ton of hours on meetings with people, right? Like we pick and choose what it is.
Absolutely.
Well, cool, man. Dude, this was awesome. I somehow feel that there's going to be another one. I can tell already people that I want to come back to the podcast. Awesome. And I would love to have in your partner that did the books with, talk to him. And with that, I know you guys are on social media. I know OAR's in Instagram. Can they find you? So you already said the book, just to make sure I got it right. myfirstfinancebook.store.
Yeah. So you can find us on .store or .com. .store is the new one. And eventually in the next couple months, I'm going to be transitioning the .com one to be the same website. And then again, like peek behind the hood on why, long story short, I bought a single domain for the .com. That was our first one. The store that came along with that was not really up to the needs of what we needed in terms of digital content and physical content. And so I ended up having to buy another website. And then in a few months, I'm going to marry them, the domain. So you can go to .com or .store and you'll get to the same website. But right now they just kind of link to each other. They're both quality websites, and it's, again, building my SEO.
Cool.
So we can reach more people.
I love that. And then I know you're on Instagram.
Yep.
OAR's on Instagram. Does OAR have their own website?
OAR does have their own website. It is Operation Allies Refuge. Let me make sure, because it's Operation Allies Refuge Foundation, and I always mess it up when I don't put it in right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Operation Allies Refuge Foundation.org.
Okay. Cool. So that's where they can find your how can I say, the things that you're working on, your projects, which is great. And dude, this was an incredible podcast. You have so much depth. You're so interesting. Any final things that you would like to share to my audience or either of your audiences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing out of all of this, right, like we can talk about finance, we can talk about whatever, but to me, I know you have a huge military following, and obviously most of my friends are somehow capacity in the military, but I just want you to know that it's, there's ways to get around whatever you're going through, and I personally am a huge believer in, take that negative energy and find a way to flip it, right? And it might seem like you're in a dark hole somewhere, but there's a light at the end of that tunnel. I think we all have lost way too many friends to that dark tunnel, right? And so I think we all we owe it to each other to help everyone find that way out. And I think building is a way that a lot of people can use, right? And so to me, I built a website, or I built a business, right? But there's a way to build. There's a way to have that positive vibe at the end that you can push yourself into. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I would say.
I like what you just said, building, right? There's such a, what is it? I'm about to read a book that was suggested to me about the things that drive men. Most men like building something, right? Whether it's, I am unable to, I refuse to fix a car now because I used to be a maintainer, but I like building stuff. So I'm building a team. So that's huge, man. Great message. I really value your time. Thank you very much. This was an excellent podcast. And that's it for this. Nice having you guys.
Talk to y'all soon.
Let me pause that.
This podcast is not financial advice, and it only represents the opinions of those participating. Our goal is to get you to your version of financial independence. Please follow and like on every platform.